Hey, it's Nora, Dad's production manager here. It's a working title. We'll see how I feel about it. Just wanted to drop in to say this week's episode discusses horror themes. Well, it doesn't go into much detail. Horror movie names and book titles are mentioned. If that isn't your cup of tea, feel free to head over to my top 5 songs for animated movies instead. Just don't tell my dad I said that. While it's not K-pop, this week's episode with Mr. Roberts is worth a listen.
Thank you for tuning into the Generational Gauntlet Top 5 Faves. This is the podcast where we give you our top 5 on a topic with a generational twist to it. My name is Matt Lambert, and I'm the host of this podcast. Each week, I bring in a guest who's from a different generation than me to discuss or debate our top 5 on a selected topic. One of the things that I enjoy the most is a great horror movie. However, my wife is not the same. She will even admit that she watched horror movies while we were dating, and as soon as I put a ring on it, she refused to watch a single horror movie going forward. Typically, at home, I'm not even allowed to talk about this genre of movie. So, this is going to release the day after Valentine's Day, and I get to talk about one of my loves, and I get to do it with a horror author, Nick Roberts, as we're going to rank our top 5 horror movies of all time. Now, before we do this, I got to go through his accolades. And when somebody reached out to me that listens to this show, they referred to Nick as the future or possibly even current Stephen King. So, Nick is a West Virginia native. He's an active member of the Horror Writers Association and the Horror Authors Guild. He's written 7 books, including Lila in the Flesh, that just released in January, and he's written a series of short works featured in 2 collections. He's contributed to literary magazines and websites. He won Debut Novel of the Year at the 2021 Horror Author Guilds Award, was on the preliminary ballot for the prestigious 2022 Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in a Novel. He won the 2023 Books of Horror Indie Author Brawl and has won Indieverse and Golden Scoop Awards. He also runs Spooky West Virginia LLC, which is a publishing entity for horror. And if those accolades aren't enough, he has a bachelor's in English, a master's in teaching, and a doctorate in leadership studies. I recently read Anathema, which was fantastic. I read the entire book in 3 days, and during the last 50 pages, I had to set aside all the other duties in my life as I had to know how the book ended. So, Nick, welcome to the podcast. You've got a background that is just legendary when it comes to writing. So welcome in. Thank you for joining me here to record an episode.
Hey, thank you for having me, and thank you for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm always down to talk horror.
Well, that leads me into my first question for you. And what got you into horror in general?
I never remember. Well, I can't think of a time when I wasn't interested in spooky, supernatural, not necessarily full blown horror, but
Hmm.
I remember being like at the library. I would always kind of hover toward like the cryptid Bigfoot true quote unquote truth section of like the little kids area of the library, and I'd find like the
Hmm.
R.L. Stein Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and yeah, then I just kind of graduated to Stephen King and then discovered there's this whole other population of horror authors other than just the man himself.
Yeah.
And yeah, but yeah, that's kind of my literary stumbling into the genre. Film and TV are a bit different.
Hmm. Okay. How did you stumble into film and TV then?
So I was watching when I was a kid. I was watching Nick at Night on Nickelodeon, and it turned on Saturday night. It turned into Snick, and the last show that they aired on Snick was called "Are You Afraid of the Dark?"
Oh,
And
I
it was
remember that.
it was a kids anthology horror show. But they didn't sugarcoat things, and it had genuine scares in it. And
Hmm.
I looked forward to Saturday at 9:30 for years, and I even have the series on VH or on DVD, and I've shown my kids. So I've passed on the love of what got me in the genre.
And Nick, I didn't mention it on the front end. You're a millennial as well, correct?
Well, what are the parameters of that age range?
So I am 39 years old and I'm a
So
millennial, and I
we're
think
the same age.
okay, so yeah, we're both millennials. I was gonna say I remember Nick at Night. I remember reading Goosebumps. I remember all the things that you're talking about. So what actually led you into becoming an author?
I always wrote short stories ever since I was a little
Hmm.
kid, and then I fell in love with movies, and I started writing screenplays in my teenage years. But
Okay.
that fell to the wayside once I started making some we'll just put it mildly and say some poor life decisions. I went through kind of a
Okay.
rough patch from about age 15 to 25.
Hmm.
My life was kind of on pause for that time. And when I unpaused it and I was 25, I went back to school. I fell in love with writing all over again.
Hmm.
And um, I met a guy in as an undergrad at Marshall University. He was a Marine, and he and I were the only two males in our little cohort. And we were both older than all of the young ladies who were in our class in the English department. So we both graduated, and a couple years later, he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I'm running a literary magazine called the Blue Mountain Review, and I'm in charge of acquisitions. And I remember you said that you loved writing fiction, and if you have a story that you'd like to submit, I'll look at it. I'm not
Hmm.
guaranteeing that it's going to make it in, but consider this a foot in the door if you have something you want to try to submit for professional publication." And I jumped at the opportunity and I wrote something that's semi based on a true story. And that story was called The Deal, and it was published in that magazine. And once I saw my name in print, that's when that kind of a new addiction started. And I wrote my
Hmm.
first full novel in 2018.
Okay, and you've written 7 books, correct?
Well, I'd have to count. So, so okay. I've got this is going to be a good test for my brain. So I've got in publishing order. I've got Anathema, The Exorcist House, It Haunts the Mind and Other Stories, Mean Spirited, Dead End Tunnel, The Exorcist House Genesis, Nocturnal by Nature and Other Stories, Anathema Legacy, The Exorcist House Resurrection, My Corpse Has a Heartbeat, and Lila in the Flesh. So we're at 11 right now, and I have to turn in my latest one by June.
Okay. Well, that just shows that my West Virginia math was not very good, so I apologize. And I know both of us are from West Virginia. Do most of your books take place with, like, the backdrop or within West Virginia?
Yes, and the reason for that is it has evolved. In the beginning, it was sort of just out of desperation. It was just like, I want to tell a scary story. I don't want to have to worry too much about the setting, so
Yeah.
I'll just write what I know. And that actually turned out to be a huge asset because from where I grew up in West Virginia and am immune to the beauty of the mountain state, whenever I write about it and other people who have not been there read it, it's like a foreign land to them. It's like folk horror almost. Like they're going
Yeah.
to this like stepping back in time where these lush rolling mountains and uh different values and beliefs. So it was and just like straight up characters.
Mhm.
So yeah, I started out just because of that, but I really love the juxtaposition of the beauty of West Virginia
Mhm.
and the horrible things I can come up with.
And I will say, without spoiling anything in your book, as I read Anathema, I was captivated, I was horrified, And I was like, this is what a good book should be. Like, this is freaking me out. And that's what I want when I read a horror book. So kudos to you. It kind of bleeds into my next question for you. If people pick up one of your books, what should they expect? Like, what are they getting if they're reading one of the 11 books you've written?
First and foremost, I want to provide entertainment and
Mm-hmm.
escapism. I want people to not want to close the book. I want them to have that problem of just one more chapter, and then I'll go to
Yes.
sleep. So that's goal number one. Goal number two is a bit more pretentious, I guess. Whenever the
Mm-hmm.
reader finishes the book, I want to leave a lasting, haunting impression with them. I don't want it to be like a book that they read and then forget about what happened in the story or anything they could possibly have learned or taken
Mm-hmm.
away from the book. And but I mean, really, I just want to scare people. I want to creep people out. I'm like that. I've heard Stephen King talk about being like, they ask him, why does he like to write the things he does? And it's not like, it's not a mean-spirited, sense of entertainment. It's like feeling giddy and being around the campfire and telling and being like, "Hey, I'm about to scare you guys with this story. Wait do you see what's up my sleeve now?" So yeah, I want people to anticipate being scared and
Mm-hmm.
finding characters that they're going to relate to and hopefully have more of a cinematic experience almost. That's kind of my goal is to trick people into reading and making them think they're watching a movie.
Well, you've done a fantastic job of that. And this might be a difficult question to answer. If I know sometimes, whether it's music, books, athletics, whatever it is, people will talk about maybe somebody that is similar to their style. Is there any other authors that you maybe equate to being similar to your style?
In terms of structure and our methods, my friend and fellow author John Durgan, he and
Hmm.
I became friends because we respected each other's work, and we both operate the same way in terms of how we write, and we have similar tastes. Now, we write different stories, obviously, but I would say that if you like my stories, you're probably gonna really like John Durgan's novels and
Okay.
his short stories.
Well, and speaking of your stories and your books, where can people find out more information about you or where could they purchase your books from?
Easiest way to find out info on me is just to Google Nick Roberts. Everything's on my author page,
Hmm.
nickrobertsauthor.com, but that's normally the first thing that pops up on Google. So
Okay.
I'm on all of the socials. My handle is SpookyWV. And so yeah, it'd be like on TikTok it's at SpookyWV. And
Okay.
but yeah, I have a link tree on my website. If people want to follow me, it's easy. I'm everywhere. I'm like Roy Kent from Ted Lasso.
I love the reference. I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan. I will be posting all of Nick's links in this episode description when it drops. So if go Google him, it's kind of like Kurt Signetti. Google him, or if you've got the episode pulled up, there'll be links in the episode description. For those who are listening that are new to the podcast, both of us have put together a top 5 list coming into today, and it's the top 5 horror movies. I don't know a thing about Nick's list. I do wonder if we're going to see some Stephen King based on some comments he just made, but Nick will kick things off. He's going to give us his number 5 movie and why. I'll give my number 5 and why, and then we'll work our way to each of our number ones. So, with that, Nick, I'm going to kick it over to you. What's your number 5 horror movie all time?
So I intentionally waited until this moment before settling on my top five because at any point throughout any day, it changes.
All right.
Like, I mean, we've had this planned for a few weeks now, and I could have easily
Mhm.
jotted down 5 titles, but I would have rearranged them, and yeah. So, right off the top, it would be so easy for me to just go straight for the classics. I'm gonna go for what my genuine favorites are, like
Okay.
what I will put on and watch and recommend to others and just enjoy. So, at number 5 is the controversial film from Eli Roth called Hostel.
Okay.
Now, if you're not familiar with Hostel, its basic premise is you have two American backpackers in Europe, and they're just having a good vacation time. They go through Amsterdam. They're living it up. They're partying, and they get connected with the wrong crowd and end up about midway through the film in this industrial building trapped, and they don't know why. And I don't want to spoil it for people, but it gets pretty gruesome. There's some very sinister forces that run this business
Mhm.
that they've stumbled into, and the roles this is why I love the film thematically. The roles of the two young men who were going around looking for partying and companionship have completely reverted, have flipped, and now
Mhm.
they find themselves as the ones who are put on the auction block, so to speak.
So Nick and I probably will both tread lightly on some of the material in the movies. One, not to ruin it for people. Two, we know that there could be some younger listeners on here. So I uh I think you've done about as fantastic of a job as you can of describing that movie. I'm very familiar with it without
Yeah,
going into like significant details. So
yeah.
I can appreciate it being on your list.
Thank you.
Well, I will give you my number 5, and I'm gonna tell you on the front end that my list, I kinda went similar to you. It's not just what's, top 5 on Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb score, or if you look at other lists. These are movies that impacted me because of who I watched them with or what was going on in my life that made them so creepy. So my number 5, I mentioned earlier, my wife stopped watching horror movies with me, but in 2004, she walked into a sold-out theater with me in West Virginia to watch the remake of Dawn of the Dead. And that night,
Nice.
I had the hottest date in the theater, but instead I was focused on the screen and a bunch of people trying to survive a zombie apocalypse in an abandoned mall. And that was actually my first exposure to the zombie genre. It stuck. I'm a huge fan of it today. I have actually lost count of how many times I've watched this movie. I own the collector's edition. I thought it had nonstop action. I thought the zombies were scarier than what we see in things like The Walking Dead. And it was, I think, maybe the 3rd or 4th date with my wife, so that just punctuated it for me. If you rely on things like Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 77% score on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't think is bad for a horror film, 7.2 on IMDb, and it brought home $102 million at the box office. It won the 2004 Golden Trailer Awards for the best horror or thriller movie, and in my personal opinion, it reinvigorated the zombie genre. For all those reasons, that's the number 5 for me. Nick, you got any problems with Dawn of the Dead being on this list?
I don't, and I respect you for picking a remake because I think I have a couple of remakes on my list
Okay.
as well. I love Dawn of the Dead. I love a lot of Zack Snyder's films.
Mhm.
I knew I was going to love that film as soon as that. I mean, you have the intense opening scene that
Yes.
it just shocked everybody. But
Yep.
then you know you're in the hands of a master when it cuts to the opening credits and you have Johnny Cash's When the Man Comes Around and you
Mhm.
have a montage of the end of the world. That sets the tone that, hey, we know how to make a great zombie film. We know how to entertain you. Let's go on a ride. So I love that movie.
Yeah, fantastic movie. Nick, I'm curious, what is your number 4?
So jumping off of your remake, I am going to go with The Thing by John Carpenter.
Ooh, okay.
if I had to pick one, and that's one thing I knew I was going to do with this was one director, one movie per director. So with John
Okay.
Carpenter, I have to go with The Thing. And I mean, a lot of horror aficionados don't realize that The Thing is a remake,
Hmm.
but it is, and it's also based on a book. So if you like The Thing and want to check out more, check out that. But yeah, so it's John Carpenter at his best with the wide, beautiful camera cinematography and camera shots of it's Antarctica. So we've got this military outfit down in Antarctica, and something happens, and a dog runs on their base with the forget who if it was like Russians or Norwegians. That's who it was. Yeah.
Mm.
So Norwegians are flying a helicopter chasing this dog onto their base, and of course they run. The Americans run the Norwegians away, and they take in the dog. Something's not right with the dog. It's been infected by some alien life form that has the ability to infect and imitate, mimic whatever it encounters. So it evokes this paranoia that few films have ever achieved, where
Yeah.
you don't know if the person sitting next to you is the thing or if it's a human. And not to mention, it's got one of the all-time greatest jump scares in any film whatsoever when they're doing the lab testing to see which one of them is the thing. So for those reasons, even though it was a commercial and critical bomb when it came out, it blew up on VHS and has since become regarded as one of the greatest horror films of all time. So, The Thing.
I have no qualms about that being on your list. I think even just the ending of that movie is when you look at lists of like some of the greatest endings of horror movies, that's typically on the list. Like it's just horror does a good job of it can leave things ambiguous and then s- people not be upset about that ending. You do that with action, other stuff we get upset, but horror is the one place it's safe to do it. I I had a feeling I wasn't gonna be able to argue or contest anything on your list, so I can't say anything about that. My number 4, I so there's gonna be a common theme with, I think, probably all 4 of my top 4. So I have a buddy, I told him before I was recording this that he's gonna get name dropped on here. One of my best friends growing up, his name is Patrick, and Patrick was like my horror guide in my life, my horror movie guru, and he's gonna play a part in all 4 of these movies from 4 to 1 for me. But number 4 is The Shining. I
Okay.
was a teenager. I watched The Shining with my buddy Patrick, and for The Shining, I alternated between being confused and absolutely horrified while I watched the film. The famous red rum scene. My dad was realized we were watching this movie, and as that scene unfolded on the screen, he ran into the room with a kitchen knife screaming red rum. So, for my dad, because he listens to this, thank you for the trauma. I watched the movie again in college and I was like, this movie holds up. And I've seen it a couple years back. I still think it holds up today. I think I've watched it 5 or 6 times at this point. The scenes are iconic. I think the descent into madness is so believable.
Yes.
And I find it creepier when I know you're a guy that likes spooky stuff. When you realize it was based on King's own stay at the iconic Stanley Hotel in Colorado, which, if you're not a fan of things like the paranormal, arguably one of the most haunted places in America. You mentioned with The Thing that it was a commercial disaster. The Shining was the same way. It was nominated for Worst Director and Worst Actress, but unlike my physical appearance, history has been kind to this movie. It's gotten better with age. Many consider this one of the greatest horror movies of all time. In 2018, it was selected for preservation by the United States National Film Registry, by the Library of Congress. So even with all of its bad publicity early on, it's got an 84% score on Rotten Tomatoes, an 8.4 on IMDb, and for the fact that it's so terrifying, it's based on a haunted place, and that my dad caused me to have nightmares for a week with the way he ran into the room, that's why it takes number 4 for me. Nick, I'll kick it back to you to hear your number 3.
Well, that's a very respectable choice, and I will say what I love about The Shining. You mentioned it; it has this uncanny quality to it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what I love about it now and its place in our history is that Stephen King hated it when it came out. Just felt that Kubrick got the whole tone of the book wrong, and there's the famous quote where King said that his book is fire and The Shining is ice, the film, and yeah, and King has since come around to being able to
Mm-hmm.
appreciate Kubrick for what he did and the icon. When people think about The Shining, they don't typically think about the book; they think about the images from the film. So
Yeah.
I love that King has accepted that and has kind of come around to it. And a side note, there is an anthology coming out this year from Jamie Flanagan, who is editing it. It's called Views from the Overlook. And it is an anthology with Stephen King's blessing, with several authors contributing stories that take place inside the Overlook, and one of which is my short story called It Creeps.
Nice. I definitely am gonna have to check that out.
Okay, so my number 3. Okay, here we go. You took The Shining. I was that was floating around up there. Number 3, I'm going to go with, and this might be debated by people who might not consider it to be horror, but I'll defend it till my dying breath. I'm gonna say The Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, that's a good one.
So, The Silence of the Lambs is one of those perfect novels that had a perfect film adaptation, and I could probably
Mm-hmm.
count on my hand how many times that has actually happened. But I watched the movie first. I watched it way too young, and
Same.
and the people who who kind of look down on the horror genre don't like to acknowledge that a horror film was winning these Academy Awards when it came
Mm-hmm.
out, but it's all in the way the film is shot. If you compare Silence of the Lambs to any other serial killer detective story, it's in the tone and the mood of the way it's shot, not to mention some of the horrific elements that happen. But
Yeah.
for example, in the film Manhunter, which is based on a book by the author who wrote The Silence of the Lambs,
Mm-hmm.
Michael Mann directed Manhunter. Now, you see a version of Hannibal Lecter, but he's played by Brian Cox in this version. And when the policeman walks up to meet him for the first time, you're walking through a super ultraviolet or super lit clinical area. It's just, you feel like you're walking into a psych ward.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to do it. Now, you go to the film The Silence of the Lambs, and when you go see Hannibal Lecter, you don't walk down a brightly lit hallway. No, you walk down into a dungeon
Mm-hmm.
of stone, of darkness, and Clarice is told that the monster is waiting for her at the last window on the left or whatever, and the camera lets you see this long hallway with these cells on either side. So and then the creepy music comes in, and our vulnerable protagonist has to walk down this dark hallway with these monstrous humans doing things and scaring her, as she has to maintain a brave face and then confront Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, which brilliantly was played by Anthony Hopkins. So, Silence of the Lambs is a perfect film. It ascends just the genre. I mean, it's one of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion.
It's funny that you say a lot of people don't consider it horror. I'll be honest. You've got me sold on it. I do think it qualifies for the genre, but when I thought of movies, it didn't come to mind for me for a horror movie. I think I plug it in like in the maybe the crime thriller is
Yeah.
kind of like my own little subgenre I have, but that movie, I think I probably saw it at a similar age as you did. Way too young to be seeing that. I remember watching it going, "What is happening? And why is my dad letting me watch this movie?" But I can't argue with anything you said. That is the casting is fantastic. The visuals, the scene with the night goggles or night vision goggles, that's fantastic. I mean, the
Oh
whole
yeah.
thing is a cinematic masterpiece. So, yeah, that one, I feel bad that it's not on my list. Like, that's a really good number 3. I'm gonna be very curious to see what you have that tops that because that's an excellent movie. My number 3, I don't think I'm alone in this, but I love a good slow burn in a horror movie that in the last, like, closing act erupts into complete insanity, and Hereditary fit the bill for me for that. I
Absolutely.
am going to tread very carefully around the plot for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, I know at least one kid listens to that. That's my daughter. Number 2, I think the less people know about this movie going in, the better. This is one of those movies, I think nowadays you watch a trailer and you're like, the trailer ruined it. It did not ruin the movie.
Yes.
When I first moved to South Carolina, my family stayed in West Virginia to finish out the school year. It was during COVID, and I was alone in a small apartment by myself for the first time in years. I was watching a ton of movies because I had nothing else to do. My best friend, Patrick, who I mentioned from The Shining, he was sending me movie recommendations, and he said, "You got to check this movie out." And Nick, I got to ask, are you familiar with the work of the movie Frozen? Like the kids' movie?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I have a
Okay.
daughter.
I'm asking that because this plays into this. So I watch Hereditary and I'm creeped out. I'm by myself in an apartment. And that night, my wife decided to hack in. I mean, she had access to it, but she decides to start playing music through the Echo speaker in my apartment. And she started playing the Frozen song with the men chopping the ice at the beginning of the movie. And in the wee hours of the night, after I've watched horror movies, that sounded terrifying. I ended up having to sleep with the light on after I cleared the rooms of the apartment. And to this day, she still tells people that story that it's the best prank she ever pulled. So I had to thank my dad for some trauma earlier. I have to thank my wife for some now. This 2018 film made over 90 million at the box office. For 4 years, it was its studio's highest grossing movie. The film had a 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 7.3 score on IMDb. And if my West Virginia math is right, it won 11 awards, including the Chicago Film Critics Association Award for Best Actress and Most Promising Filmmaker. Toni Collette won Best Actress in 5 different award shows. This film goes into some deep emotions on things like grief and familial matters, and I'm going to leave it at that. But for how terrified I was, the scenes that made me sleep with the light on, and the fact that this movie is so well received and recognized, it had to be number 3 on my list. So that's my number 3, Nick. I'll hand it back over to you.
That was a great choice, and I love Ari Aster, and the one of the biggest snubs of all time as far as the Oscars is Toni Collette's performance in that film.
Yeah. Oh, it was so good. I mean, it's so believable. Like I forgot I was watching the movie.
I recently just showed my some I forget who it was. I showed somebody the dinner scene. It's sort of her monologue that
Uh-huh.
should have won her a lifetime achievement award at the Oscars. But yeah, just rewatching that, and I mean, it's amazing. And yeah,
Yeah. Fantastic movie.
all right.
Well,
So
Nick,
is it?
speaking of movies, what's Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is it my number two?
Yes, you're number 2.
All right. So we're down to the the ones that I have to keep on here that won't be surprising, I don't think. So I just wouldn't feel right without leaving these two off. But at number two, I'm going to have to go with a film that inspired me to want to make film.
Okay.
It's a film that for the first time made me think like I was watching something I was not supposed to be watching. Like, I was young when I watched it, and I was not supposed to be watching it, but it felt like something no human should be allowed to watch. And that is the original The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, that's a good one.
So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm gonna preface this by saying it gets a bad rep because people hear the name, obviously, and
Mhm.
associate it with gratuitous violence and no plot. It's basically a bloodless film. When
Mhm.
when people go back and watch it, it's all trick shots and quick cuts. You're not seeing what you think you're seeing, which is just brilliant filmmaking. The reason why it still holds up is because Toby Hooper, the writer director, he created a sense of dread and unease
Mhm.
that is unparalleled in any film. Now, I did see it young, but it felt like I was watching a documentary. And that's what I mean when I said that I was like, Is it legal for this to be in Blockbuster right now?" But I watched it, and as soon as Leatherface opens the door and he just slides this metal door open, he's wearing a butcher's apron and he's got a mask on, and he's standing there, and our doomed protagonist, who just happened to stumble into this house, looks up at him from toe to face, and it's this shot. You're seeing it through his eyes, and you see Leatherface, and it is literally the birth of a horror icon in that
Mhm.
one scene. It's just this guy exploring a house. Whoosh, door opens, Leatherface is standing there. Smack, guy goes down, gets pulled into the room, door slams shut, and you're like, what just happened? And a horror icon is born. And I think that's one of the best introductions to any of like the Mount Rushmore of like slasher boogeymen. I
Mhm.
think Leatherface needs to be on there.
So Nick, I agree. Great movie. It did not make my top 5. I'm gonna go ahead and say that. It's not my top 2. It was, I think when I was going through, I had ranked, I was looking at the top 10 and I had that like number 8 for me. So I again can't dispute you having it on there. I the more I hear you talk about it, the more I'm probably wrong on not including it on mine. But I do like how you talk about the kind of like the Mount Rushmore of horror villains or however you want to refer to them. Because one of my final 2 would I would consider being on that Mount Rushmore. My number 2 is not. This is probably the most controversial one I put on the list for me. I'm going to give some data that undermines my pick, but then I'll say why it's number 2. Number 2 for me is 2008, The Strangers. And
Ooh.
if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, 50% score. Not very good. IMDb 6.1. It grossed 82 million at the box office, but it did inspire 2 sequels. And if compared to every other movie in my top 5, this has the worst ratings according to critics, according to fans. But the reason it's number 2 is that this movie scared me probably more than any other movie that I had watched. And it's the randomness of our antagonists and how they just picked a random couple to mess with. It scared me in ways I had not imagined. So at the time I saw this movie, I had recently graduated college. I think I was right before I was getting my first like real job. I had graduated with a degree in criminal justice. So I was someone that read a lot of true crime. I studied a lot of it, and it made this movie more impactful for me. I saw this film with a large group of guys. Uh, it's- I've said it a few times. He's going to be on this list multiple times. My buddy Patrick. If you're listening, Patrick, you're the GOAT. He was with me that night with this group of guys who were watching it. We went to a theater in West Virginia, and we got this large group. I think everybody in the group, they're either late in their college career or they're recently graduated. I was engaged to be married, and yet myself and several of the men sitting in the row with me were literally shrieking out loud from the jump scares in the movie. This movie made me feel like my heart was going to leap out of my chest. The guys I saw the movie with had parked elsewhere that night. I was the only one parked in this specific area of town. We watched the late showing, so it's like 11 something at night. I just watched this movie about these random people getting after people, and I don't think I've ever walked so fast to my car in my life. I thought everyone was a threat. I remember I had my keys in my hands, like I'm gonna throw hands with somebody. I turned the lights on for the first little bit of my drive, and I still lived at home with my parents. I had not moved out just yet. I think they were out of town, and I am not too proud to admit it was the fastest I've ever unlocked a door in my life. So I think it was back in October. My daughter, she's become a horror fan herself, and she was asking me what are the scariest movies that I had seen. And The Strangers made that list for me. I think at the time it was what I said was the scariest movie I had seen. And Nick, I don't know, did you watch that movie back in the day?
Yes, I saw it in theaters. I loved it. Love that you picked it.
I was gonna ask, did it freak you out? Because other millennials I've talked to thought it was a movie that was creepy to them from the jump scares.
What creeped me out and what I love most about the types of scares that it accomplishes is the long shots where you don't
Mhm.
know that you're looking at something because you don't see it yet. And you mentioned when you brought up Hereditary, that has a similar type of scare where
Mhm.
the scare is already in the frame and the shot is just holding on the character. And then your eyes sort of wander around the frame like, what's going on? Where's the action? Or something kind of moves slightly in the background, and you see, like, for Hereditary, for example, something's been on the ceiling the entire time you've been watching
Yes.
this kid in his bed. Or with The Strangers, you're looking at this woman in her kitchen, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, she's not alone in her house right now, and she
Yes.
doesn't know it.
And that's
So,
terrifying. Like, it's
yes.
for me, like, when it's something that is it's real, it's tangible, and I'm like, "There's no question, that's a person, and a person can physically put hands on you." That's why for me, like I said, I remember being so creeped out on the drive home, creeped out that I was home alone in this big house, kind of in a semi-rural area, so that's why it's number 2 for me. Nick, I am extremely curious to hear what made your number 1.
Before I say that, I'm just going to throw something out there since you're such a fan of The Strangers. Have you seen the French Romanian horror film called Ils? ILS.
I
Translated
have
to,
not.
okay, it's the English word is them. So, them came out in 2006 and it's got English subtitles, and
Okay.
it is the story that inspired The Strangers. So, they marketed The Strangers as being based on a true story.
Mhm.
The true story happened overseas, and
Okay.
it's basically these 3 teenagers who committed a random act of violence, and that's what the film Them is about, and it came out in 2006, and then along come The Strangers in 2008, and they're very similar. And not to say that The Strangers is, like, ripping off or anything like that,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
yeah, whenever they get brought up, whenever The Strangers gets brought up in conversation, a lot of times Ills will also get an honorable mention, so, yeah, check that movie out, I think you'll dig it.
I just plugged it into a note on my phone as, it's on my to-do list now.
There you go. So my number 1, um, I mean, I'd love to name a bunch of random ones or take a big swing, but that would be disingenuous. I have to go with The Exorcist as my not only as do I think it's the objectively, and I am saying this, it is objectively the scariest and best horror film ever made. It's also my favorite horror film ever made. I can and it's another one of those examples of a perfect novel being adapted into a perfect film. And I mean, people have talked about the brilliance of The Exorcist ad nauseum, but what I attribute its massive effect, it's the reason why it works so well, is because, again, it's not filmed. First of all, William Friedkin was not a horror director, so it's not
Mhm.
filmed by a horror director who's trying to hit certain tropes or who's trying to light scenes a certain way or make a horror film. Stanley Kubrick was not trying to make a horror film when he made The Shining. He was making an
Mhm.
anti-horror film, which made it that much more uncanny. But with The Exorcist, William Friedkin filmed it like a documentary, and it was so shocking. You have this actress who's in Georgetown filming a movie, and
Mhm.
her daughter Reagan, I forget her age in the story, but I think she's around like 8 or 9, something like that. But
Yeah.
she starts exhibiting signs of mental health issues, bipolar disorder, things of that nature. And they take her mom has her see a doctor. Her symptoms progress until they become even stranger to the point where there's something that the medical field can't provide answers to, and she seeks answers from the Catholic Church. And that's where we meet our third main, well, I guess our fourth main character, which would be Father Damien Karras, a young
Mhm.
priest who just lost his mother, struggling a bit with his faith, and he's brought in to try and help the mother and the daughter to see what's really going on. And I will say that the reason why it's so good is because I mean it hits on all fronts. The script is perfection, but they pulled most of the script and dialogue from the book,
Mhm.
and the author actually wrote the script. So that's that. But the performances are amazing. I believe Linda Blair, who played young Reagan, she either won or was nominated for an Academy Award
Mhm.
for her performance. And so the acting, the writing, the filmmaking, it's just firing on all cylinders. And I remember the first time I watched it, again, way too early to watch this film. I was at a sleepover, and one of my buddies rented The Exorcist. He heard it was scary, and he put it in and played it. I watched like the first 30 minutes, and I was like, "This is boring. This is just a bunch of older people dealing with things. I don't really understand what this Catholic priest is doing. What's going on? Like, where's the monster with the mask? Like, what's happening?" And then all of a sudden, um, the mother hears something in the bedroom and walks in, hears this commotion, and she sees
Mhm.
her daughter bouncing up and down on the bed, and it it does a close up on Reagan's face, and she screams, and her eyes roll back in the back of her head, revealing nothing but the whites of her eyes. And she makes this guttural type of sound. And I literally felt my stomach drop, and I had to turn away from the screen and look out my friend's window, and I stared out that window for an hour and a half until the movie was over. I couldn't look at the screen. And that probably made it worse because I had to hear the voice that inhabits Reagan for the finale of the film. I just had to listen to that, and oh my gosh, like it terrified me to no end. I had to sleep in the floor of siblings' rooms for a while after because I couldn't be alone. I mean, but here is the biggest thing it did for me as a human and as an author is that it made me think. Like it made me for the first time I was young and it made me question things like about the universe, about
Mhm.
God, about these things that I wasn't thinking about my toys or movies. I was like, whoa, like there are forces out there. Like, what is the meaning of life? Like, what is, like, it made me think deep philosophical questions. And it gave me that gift in the form of a very deranged horror film. And like Hereditary, I would say it qualifies as elevated horror along with
Mhm.
Silence of the Lambs. So, yeah, The Exorcist, I can watch it today and it still holds up. It I just recently bought the 4K restoration of
Mhm.
it, and it's just a beautiful film. I mean, there's some very gruesome, grotesque things that happen in it,
Mhm.
but the message on the whole, I think, is beautiful. It's to question spirituality.
Mhm.
It just made me think about things like that. So if a genre film can make a, I don't know how old I was at the time, but let's say I was 10. If it can make a 10-year-old question, or give a 10-year-old an existential crisis, I'd say there's something to it.
So, Nick, I'm gonna be honest, The Exorcist did not make my top 5. It was in consideration. I think I placed it at 6, I feel like when I say 6, 7, I think of all the kids. It was in the 6 or 7 range. So I actually saw The Exorcist later in life. I and I don't even know why. Like, I got into horror, and then I started to watch more of, like, more recent horror when I got into it. So I didn't watch it until I was probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years into watching horror movies. So it hit me a little bit different. Probably for you, you had, like, that whole shock value where it was, like, your first kinda taste of this type of film. I
Yeah,
I
I
see,
went
like,
into it completely blind. Like, I knew nothing about its notoriety. I just knew it was some movie my friend rented.
and see, that's where I had a lot of people build it up for me. I thought it was still fantastic, but it didn't, I don't think it hit me as hard as it would have if I didn't know what to expect going in, which kinda leads to my number 1 because I had no knowledge of what to expect on my number 1, and I'm going all the way back to 1978 for mine, and that's the OG Halloween. So I saw this movie with the same friend I've mentioned multiple times. After we watched it, we had to go walk his dogs at like 11 at night. And I remembered us walking the dogs, and I was terrified that Michael Myers was going to pop out from behind the bushes. Like I thought he was coming for us. So obviously, the Halloween, I'm talking about the Michael Myers franchise. This movie spawned the various Halloween movies. It's been rebooted multiple times. The Halloween franchise is the 12th highest grossing horror movie franchise of all time. For me, you mentioned Leatherface being on that Mount Rushmore of horror villains. I put Michael Myers up there with him. He still holds up for me. This year for Halloween, my daughter dressed up as Annabelle and I dressed up as Michael Myers. So still
Nice.
dressing up for him at, pushing 40 years old. If I have to say what really locked me in as a horror fan, this was the movie. So you mentioned The Exorcist being your like entrance into the horror genre. This was the entrance for me, which is why I had to put it number 1. It's what locked me in as a horror fan. The film, for those that don't know, only had a $300,000 budget. Yet it brought home $70 million, becoming one of the highest grossing independent films of all time. It brought Michael Myers into the film world. The score by John Carpenter's legendary. I think when I was doing research, I was looking, there's many sites and critics that consider this one of the more influential horror films of all time, even crediting it with being part of the basis for the slasher genre of movies. It gave us our whole final girl trope. It's got a 97% score on Rotten Tomatoes, a 7.7 on IMDb. It won the 1979 New Generation Award at the LA Film Critic Association Awards and the Critic Awards at the Avariaz International Fantastic Film Festival in 79. In 2006, it was even preserved in the Library of Congress as it being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And in 2023, Jamie Lee Curtis was inducted into the Online Film and Television Association Hall of Fame, for her portrayal as Laurie Strode. This movie inspired more than just a franchise, but really inspired an entire genre of horror films. It brought us who I think is one of the most iconic horror villains, one of the most iconic final girls. It won awards, it's got high reviews, and it's the movie that locked me in as a horror movie fan many, many years ago. So, for all those reasons, that's why I ranked it number one. Nick, you're the expert here. You're the horror author. You're the guy that's got all the accolades. Tell me, how wrong was my list today?
No, I'm highly impressed with your list, honestly. I loved it. I would be perfectly content exchanging lists with you
Okay.
because I love Halloween. Also, Michael Myers is the George Washington on the Mount
Oh,
Rushmore.
yes, yes.
Uh, Leatherface is like to the maybe off to the corner somewhere. He gets a side position, but Michael Myers, yeah, he's the definitive boogeyman. But also, like I did with the strangers and throwing out ills, I would be it would be irresponsible of me not to bring up Black Christmas, which came out 1 or 2 years prior to Halloween, and
Mhm.
is just as effective, but it's just criminally underrated and underseen. And it's because I mean, John Carpenter used the whole opening of Halloween from Black Christmas. I mean, he's stated that in interviews, and I love Black Christmas. If you haven't seen that, Bob Clark, who directed A Christmas Story and all kinds of other movies, he was just like a journeyman director. But yeah, Black Christmas, the original, not the remake, but the original 1970 something Black
I think it's
Christmas.
74 maybe,
Yeah,
or
uh,
5. Somewhere around there.
is terrifying, and Halloween would not exist without it. That does not mean that Halloween is any less of a film because of that. It was
Mhm.
just the next evolution. And yeah, I love Halloween. Nothing bad to say about it. Um, I have my own Michael Myers mask. I think I have a collection of masks
Okay.
from movies, and I buy from Trick or Treat Studios because they do the authentic replications. And
Nice.
my favorite version of Michael Myers is the mask from even though I didn't like the film as much, is from the 2018 remake, the most recent trilogy.
Yes, yes.
I love that mask from Halloween 2018, so that's the mask that I have, and I wore it, 2 or 3 years ago, so, yeah. I also
So what
whenever I hit, I forget what milestone I was going for book sales or something, but I was trying to drum up publicity, and I said that if I hit X amount of sales, then I will get into this, polar ice plunge that I had, and I I achieved that goal, and I went out on my back porch. I washed and sanitized the giant trash can and and filled it up with ice water. Put on my Michael Myers mask so people couldn't see me wince and scream, and sat in that ice water like a boss, like it didn't affect me whatsoever. And yeah, so that's the mask holds a special place in my heart.
I've got all the respect for you. I did one of those polar plunges when I first moved here to South Carolina and got in the ocean. I think it was like on New Year's Day, and I got in and immediately got out. So staying in the ice water, mad respect for you. Like you're a better man than I am. That's for sure.
If you can make it to a minute 30, and you can set your timer to this, your body goes numb, you don't feel any more pain, and it's complete euphoria at the 2-minute mark. So I do it
I
every day now. I have my little thing set up on the back porch. Yeah.
I have one and
It's
I
been
just haven't
really
used it.
cold.
Well, Nick, I know you are a very busy man. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to hop on here with me. It's the time of year right now where, I mean, shoot, even down here in South Carolina, it's cold. it gets dark early. So if you're looking for something to curl up beside the fireplace, you're looking for something to totally creep you out, grab one of his books, curl up under a blanket, and prepare to be terrified. As always, for those listening, I appreciate all of you all for checking us out. Please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and let someone know to give this podcast a listen. I want this podcast to cover topics that interest you. If you have a top 5 list that you want us to rank, I take suggestions at generationalfave5@gmail.com. That's generational, FAVE, the number 5 at gmail.com. Thank you all for tuning in.